He did not hear the bomb that took his convoy, just the ringing, and then silence. 2 hours later, a trembling nose nuzzled his hand through the sand. He thought he was hallucinating, but the dog was real. And she did not just find him, she gave him a reason to keep breathing. Years later, her name still echoes across the desert winds. Part 1: The Girl with the Dusty Paws. Iraq, February 1991. Outside the ruins of Albisaya, Private First Class Tom Delaney had not spoken to another human in 16 hours. The desert was quiet after the strike, too quiet. His unit had been moving supplies north when a cluster of mortar rounds hit just outside the perimeter. The blast flipped their Humvee like a toy. He remembered the scream of metal. The next thing he knew, he was lying in a shallow ditch, bleeding from the forehead and covered in sand. At first, he would try the radio. Static, then shouting. Nothing. He was 28 years old, a supply clerk with no combat training beyond what basic gave him. Tom was not a hero. He counted boots, packed boxes, and loaded manifests. But now, he was alone in hostile territory, wounded and barely able to move his left arm. The sun had blistered high by the time the sand began to shift. At first he thought it was another hallucination. He was dehydrated, light-headed, with a hot buzz in his ears like bees under his skin. Then he saw her small, dusty, ribs showing through patchy fur, and eyes so big they almost looked human. A tan mutt, maybe part Saluki or desert sighthound, with ears too big for her head and one bent paw that she did not seem to notice. She did not bark, just padded up slowly, lowered her head, and pressed her nose to his fingers. Tom blinked hard. You were real. The dog sat back on her haunches, tail twitching in the dust. That moment cracked something inside him. He let out a broken laugh that quickly turned into a cough. You better not be a ghost. She was not. Over the next hour, the dog did not leave his side. She kept watch, pacing in small loops around the crater where he lay. When Tom tried to sit up, she leaned against him, steadying him with her thin body. He named her Whisper. That night, under a sky blooming with tracer fire and fear, Whisper curled beside him, and for the first time since the war began, Tom felt something close to peace. Tom and Whisper stayed hidden for 2 more days before a search and rescue unit spotted their makeshift signal mirror, a shard of the Humvee's broken side mirror. By then, Tom had tied a strip of his undershirt around Whisper's front leg to keep her from limping too hard on the bent paw. She never let it slow her down. The medic tried to shoo the dog away as they loaded Tom into the chopper. She is not mine, Tom said through cracked lips. They let her come. Back at the camp hospital, word spread quickly. The quiet clerk with the ghost dog. Some called her an omen, others a miracle. But to Tom, Whisper was just what her name implied: soft, steady, always near. He kept her close as the weeks rolled on, even after the ceasefire, even when the others shipped out. Whisper slept beside his cot, waited by the gates, and sat through mail call like she was expecting a letter. Tom never wrote home, not since his brother died in Nam and his parents stopped answering. The war had taken enough from him already. But Whisper, she gave something back. In March, a chaplain approached him outside the tent. "They are pulling back to Kuwait in 2 weeks." The chaplain said, "Dogs won't be allowed on the flight manifest." Tom looked down at Whisper, her eyes half closed in the sun. "Then I am not going. You can just stay here." Tom did not reply. He rubbed the dog's ear gently between his fingers. She leaned in. That night, he packed his duffel slowly. Whisper watched. She knew. Somehow, she always knew, as dawn rose over the dunes. He tucked something into the pocket of his jacket, a photo of a young man, his brother, leaning against a fishing boat on a Michigan lake. The only thing he would carried with him from home. He looked at Whisper. "I could not save him," he whispered. "But maybe I can save you." She licked his knuckles. Outside, the engines roared. Part 2, one paw on American soil. Tom Delaney stood on the tarmac at Ali al-Salem Air Base, with Whisper wrapped in a torn army poncho, her head tucked beneath his arm like a child hiding from a storm. She hated the noise of the C-130S. Too many memories in those engines. He was not sure how he would done it, probably a mix of favors, silence, and stubbornness, but somehow she was with him. "No animals on board," the airman said flatly, clipboard in hand, eyes on the manifest. Tom didn't move. "She is not cargo," he said. "She is my responsibility. She is not on the list. She saved my life." The airman paused, eyes flicking to the dog's trembling body. Whisper looked up, one eye cloudy now from a minor explosion that had sprayed dirt and debris near her face weeks earlier. The man sighed. "Put her in your lap. Keep her quiet." Tom nodded once. Whisper did not make a sound the entire flight home. When the wheels hit US, Soledova, Tom exhaled for the first time in hours. Whisper looked up at him as if to say, "We made it." He would never thought of Michigan as home. Not since the accident that took his brother, and not since his parents stopped calling. But it was where his discharge papers sent him, and he had nowhere else to go. He rented a one-room trailer just outside Traverse City, close enough to civilization, but quiet enough that Whisper could roam without fear. She did not like the cold much, her paws lifting off the snow like it stung, but she stayed close to him, always, as if she still feared he would vanish without her. Tom found work at a bait shop off Route 31. Stocking shelves, measuring night crawlers by the dozen. It was not much, but it was enough for a man who no longer wanted much. He never talked about the war. No one asked. And if they noticed the dog that shadowed him everywhere, from the aisles to the cooler room, they did not say a word. Whisper had a way of commanding quiet respect. In the evenings, Tom sat on the porch with her curled at his feet, a worn blanket draped over both their shoulders. The sound of Lake Michigan's distant waves was the only noise. Sometimes, he would talk to her, think they remember us. Her ears would twitch, never answering, always listening. One morning in late spring, a woman pulled into the bait shop parking lot with a German Shepherd pup in the back seat, shivering and thin. She said she found him behind a gas station dumpster. Wasn't he sure what to do? Tom did not ask questions. He fetched a water bowl and a can of tuna from the break room. Whisper watched quietly. Head tilted. The pup licked her chin. The next day, the woman returned with another stray. Word spread. Quietly at first, a man at the bait shop took in dogs. No judgment. No questions. By July, Tom had 6 dogs in the trailer and a list of names scribbled on the back of an old Desert Storm ration box. People looking to adopt. He never charged a cent. He only asked for one thing. You treat him like family, he said, or I come get him back. He meant it. One night, Tom woke to the sound of Whisper whimpering in her sleep. Her legs twitched, ears flicking against the pillow they now shared. He whispered, brushing her fur gently. It is just the wind. But it was not. By morning, she could not rise. Her body trembled when she tried, and her eyes held something he had not seen before: pain. He called a vet, a woman named June who ran a mobile clinic for rescue dogs. She examined Whisper in the back of her van. Quietly, carefully, with the reverence of someone tending to a saint. She is old, June said softly, and that limp's gotten worse. Could be her kidneys. Tom knelt beside her. Whisper's head rested in his palm. She got me out of hell, he said. June placed a hand on his shoulder. You gave her heaven. For the next few weeks, he cooked Whisper scrambled eggs and let her sleep on his pillow. He read aloud from a tattered paperback he would carry through the Desert Steinbeck short stories, the only book that survived the blast. When the day came, it was cloudy and quiet, like the war-torn dawn they would first met. Tom buried her under the pine tree near the porch. Wrapped in the same army poncho he would first carried her in. A dog tag hung from a wooden cross above the grave, etched with her name by hand. Whisper. Beneath it, just 2 words. Still here. He sat by her grave until nightfall. Then he got up, went inside, and began writing something on the back of an old packing slip. It was the first page of a mission statement. Whisper, house, dog rescue and sanctuary, for the ones who saved us. Part 3, the dogs we leave behind. The sign was just a piece of plywood nailed between 2 trees. The words Whisper House burned into the wood with a soldering iron. Tom did not have much money, but he had time and he had purpose. It started with 3 more dogs that summer. A mother and her 2 pups found on the shoulder of a county road. Bellies swollen with worms, ribs sharp against their skin. The sheriff called Tom directly. You are the guy with the place. You will know what to do. He did not. Not always. But he was learning. He watched YouTube videos at the library, learned how to treat mange with sulfur dips and oatmeal baths, learned how to blend rice and boiled chicken for dogs with damaged stomachs, learned that silence was not always peace sometimes. It was trauma curling itself around a soul too tired to bark. The dogs taught him that they came in all shapes and scars: pit bulls with cigarette burns, retrievers afraid of raised hands, chihuahuas that flinched at the sound of keys. And every one of them, in their own time, found their way to his lap, his side, his heart. The only one who did not was a brindle mutt named Shadow. Shadow came in after the first frost, carried in the arms of a teenage girl named Abby who'd been watching Tom's place from the roadside for weeks before finally approaching. She barely said a word, just handed the dog over, tears running down her wind-chapped cheeks. "He is not mine," she mumbled, "but I think he needs you." Tom nodded. Shadow was bigger than Whisper had been, with a massive chest and sad, yellow eyes that followed Tom everywhere, but never blinked when stared at. He never growled, never barked, just watched, like a sentry. It took 2 weeks before Shadow let Tom touch him without recoiling. It took 3 before he wagged his tail. But it was on the 4th week on a Sunday morning in late November that something changed. Tom had gone out to the old tool shed to check the traps. He was not a hunter. But mice did not take holidays and slipped on a patch of ice. He fell hard. The wind knocked clean from his lungs. Shadow, who never left the porch, was at his side in seconds. He did not bark. He nudged. He stayed. And when Tom finally stood again, arm bruised and ego battered, Shadow walked beside him the whole way back, shoulder brushing his thigh. That night, Tom sat on the porch swing with Shadow at his feet and a mug of black coffee in his hands. The wind smelled of lake and pine. "You all have stories," he said softly. "I wonder what yours is." Shadow did not look up. Tom sighed. "Mine started in a crater." He reached down and touched the old dog tag he wore around his neck now. Whispers. It had become a kind of talisman, half prayer, half memory. "She found me when I thought I was done," he said. "Maybe that is what this is. Just paying it forward." Shadow lifted his head, then looked directly at him. Tom felt something shift. By the time winter came full and heavy, Whisper House had 8 dogs in residence, plus Shadow. Each had their own crate inside the refurbished trailer, with blankets sewn from thrifted flannel and names painted above their spots. Tom had built a run in the backyard from donated fencing, and June the traveling vet stopped by once a month now. She brought more than medicine. She brought ideas. "You ever think about going non-profit?" she asked one evening, tucking a bottle of antibiotics into the cooler. Tom shook his head. "I am not the paperwork type. You would get donations, grants, maybe even volunteers. I did not start this to turn it into something." June looked around the dogs sleeping soundly, the neatness of their corner beds, the worn path Tom had dug between the kitchen and the kennel yard with his boots. "I think you already have," she said. That night, Tom opened the drawer of his desk, the same one Whisper had slept under her last week, and pulled out a photo of her. It was the only one he had. June had taken it, without him knowing, the morning after Whisper's first snowfall. Her eyes were closed, snowflakes on her nose. He stared at it a long time. Then he began writing again. Mission: to give abandoned dogs the one thing every soldier longs for after war. A home. Part 4 letters that never came. Winter hit harder than usual that year. Lake effect snow buried the fence posts by mid-January, and Tom spent every morning chipping ice out of water bowls with the backside of a wrench. The dogs did not mind. Most of them had known worse than cold. But the stillness of the season crept in deeper than frost. Tom had started keeping a journal at June's suggestion, not for his thoughts, but for the dogs. A log of their histories. If anyone asked, most did not have birthdays, so he gave them one. He wrote down where they were found, what food they liked, which ones flinched at the sound of zippers or refused to go through doors. Shadow's page stayed mostly blank. Under notes, he had only written, "Watches the mailbox every day," and it was true. Every morning, Tom would walk down the gravel driveway with a faded red pail full of kibble, and Shadow would follow, always pausing near the rusted metal box with its flag forever lowered, staring at it with the patience of someone who still hoped. It unnerved Tom at first, then it broke him. One day, he walked back from the box with empty hands and said aloud, "No letters today, Bud." Shadow did not move. That night, Tom could not sleep. In the early hours, he sat by the kitchen table with a pen in his hand and a mug of instant coffee turning cold. He stared at a blank sheet of paper, then he began to write. "Dear friend, I do not know if you are out there, but there is a dog here who waits for you." He kept writing. It was not really for anyone, but the words poured out anyway. He sits by the box like a soldier waiting for orders. Like maybe someone promised him they would write when they could. Maybe they never got the chance. Tom folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. He did not address it, just wrote one word on the front, to whoever left him behind. The next morning, he slipped it into the mailbox. Shadow did not follow him back. He stayed by the post all day. 2 weeks passed. Snow thawed enough to reveal last autumn's leaves, soggy and forgotten beneath the drifts. The air smelled of wet bark and wood smoke. Tom was out chopping dead limbs behind the trailer when he saw the truck, a red Ford pickup, rattling up the drive with mud in its tires and dust on the windshield. Woman stepped out, grey at the temples, military posture, boots too clean for this kind of place. She held a manila envelope in one hand. "I am looking for Tom Delaney," she said. Tom set the axe down. "That is me." She glanced past him toward the porch, where Shadow stood watching. Tail still. "I got your letter." Tom frowned. "I did not send it." "I know," she said, "but it found me anyway." Her name was Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Holt. Retired use. Air Force. She told Tom that Shadow had belonged to her son, James, a combat engineer killed in an ambush outside Samoa in '07. James had raised Shadow from a pup, smuggled him onto base despite every rule against it, and sent one letter home describing him. "He knows when I am sad, like Whisper used to." Remember Whisper? Amanda's eyes had welled when she said the name. "He was our family dog when James was little." She said, "She died when he was 10. Tom had to sit down. She looked at Shadow. "We never knew what happened to the dog after the attack. They said he ran off." maybe looking for James. Tom swallowed. He has been waiting. She nodded slowly. Shadow did not run to her, but he walked slowly, purposefully like a soldier reporting for duty, and rested his head against her knee. She dropped the envelope, knelt, held him, and wept. That night, she stayed for dinner. Shadow lay at her feet beneath the table, while they ate chicken stew out of mismatched bowls. She told stories about James, about their farm in Kansas, about how the sound of helicopters still made her flinch when she asked if she could take Shadow home. Tom hesitated. "I do not want to take him from you," she said. "You are not." Tom replied, "You are bringing him home." As she backed out the driveway the next morning, Shadow's head poked from the open window. Eyes locked on Tom until the truck disappeared behind the trees. Tom stood there a long time. Then he turned, walked back to the porch, and opened a fresh page in his journal. Shadow. Found. Roadside. Late autumn. Returned to someone who never stopped missing him. Final note. Some dogs are just waiting for goodbye. Part 5, the ones who stay. March came in with wet skies and thawing roads, and with it came a quiet Tom had not expected. For the first time since Whisper's death, there was no dog sleeping beside his bed. The trailer felt emptier than it was. There were still 5 rescues under his care: Clover, the 3-legged mutt who danced when she heard jazz; Bew, a barrel-chested bulldog who snored louder than a chainsaw; Tilly, the deaf spaniel who barked at her own shadow; and the bonded pair of elderly Dachshunds, Samily, who moved like they shared one brain. They needed him, but something about Shadow's goodbye had carved a deeper hollow. He did not say much for a few days, just fed the dogs, walked them in the mud, and sat alone on the porch with Whisper's tag in his hand, tracing the letters like a ritual. That is when the letter came. It was not from Amanda. It was not even signed. Just a plain envelope with blocky handwriting. To Whisper House, care of Tom Delaney. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. Saw your story in the county paper. I do not have much to give, but I have a dog who needs you. She belonged to my brother. He died last month. I can keep her. Not because I do not want to, because I can't look at her without remembering. She is a good girl. Her name is Penny. Please help. There was an address. A town up north he would never been to. Tom folded the letter carefully and looked at the sleeping dogs in their beds. Then he grabbed his coat. It was a 3-hour drive on winding roads, still slick from melting snow. Past farmland, shuttered gas stations, and lonely barns with peeling red paint. The house sat at the end of a gravel lane, one porch light burning in the late afternoon grey. Penny was on the porch. She was an old yellow lab, white at the muzzle, with the slow, sad movements of someone who had loved too long and lost too much. She did not bark when he approached. She only wagged once softly and pressed her head against his chest. Tom felt it again, that thing he never had a word for. Grief, recognition, grace. The man who met him at the door was no older than 40, with eyes that looked twice that. He did not say much, just helped him load Penny into the passenger seat of the truck. Her leash looped gently around the gear shift. Before closing the door, he said, "My brother called her our better angel." Tom nodded. "I think they all are." Back at Whisper House, Penny walked through the door like she would always belonged. Tilly sniffed her face. Clover nudged her gently. Even Bew lifted his sleepy head in a half-hearted greeting. Tom laid out a bed near the fireplace. Penny circled it once, twice, then laid down with a long sigh that spoke more than words ever could. That night, as snow fell again against the window glass, Tom wrote another entry in the journal. Penny, arrival, March 16th, age, unknown, heart, tired, soul, infinite, notes. Doesn't he bark? Doesn't he beg? Just watches the fire and makes you feel safe. Final line. The better angels have 4 legs. The next morning, there were 3 letters in the mailbox. One was a donation from a schoolteacher in Wisconsin. The other, a handmade thank you card with a child's crayon drawing of a dog in a red cape. The third was from a Vietnam vet in Florida who had seen a local news clip someone had posted online. I never wrote back to the dog that pulled me out of a river in '68. But maybe this is how I do that now. Keep doing what you are doing. You are saving more than dogs. Tom set the letters down on the table. His hand trembled a little. Then he reached for a fresh sheet of paper and began to write back. That spring, Whisper House became more than a shelter. It became a memory stitched into the lives of people who needed to believe that not everything broken stays broken. People came from miles to see it. Some brought donations. Some brought stories. Some came with trembling hands and tearful eyes, looking for forgiveness they never received from war, or family, or themselves. Tom never asked questions. He just put the kettle on, showed them where the dogs slept, and listened. They always left lighter. Part 6, the sound of her name. Summer came late to northern Michigan that year. The lake thawed slower, the lilacs bloomed shyly, and the days unfolded like a soft breath one after another, without rush or regret. Penny had taken to sleeping beside Thomas' bed, just like Whisper had. She moved slower each week, but her eyes still held that quiet wisdom. She did not need to follow him everywhere. Just watching was enough. Tom talked to her more than he realized. Not because he expected answers, but because silence had become sacred. On the first warm Saturday of May, a boy arrived. He could not have been more than 10. He wore a button-up shirt too big for his frame, and held the leash of a shaggy white dog whose fur clumped around the eyes. Behind him stood a man, his grandfather, by the look of the worn boots and cautious steps. "You the one they called Delaney?" the old man asked. Tom nodded, brushing sawdust from his shirt. He had been repairing a broken step on the porch. The boy did not wait. He knelt down beside the white dog and whispered something in her ear. Then he turned to Tom and spoke with a firmness far beyond his years. "Her name's Daisy. She was my mom's. Mom's gone now. Tom took off his cap. Sorry. The boy nodded once. Grandpa says we can't keep her. Not 'cause we do not want to. 'Cause she won't eat. Just sits by the closet where Mom kept her shoes. Tom knelt, looking the dog in the eyes. They were cloudy with grief. She looks like she is waiting for someone who is not coming back, Tom said softly. The boy did not flinch. That is why we brought her here. Grandpa says you help dogs like that. I try. Tom replied. The boy said, you listen to them. That night, Tom walked Daisy around the yard with Penny trailing behind. The moon hung low and orange, like it had melted halfway through the trees. Daisy did not bark. She did not play. But when Tom sat by the fire pit and said her name again softly, as if to test the sound, her ears twitched. Daisy. He whispered. She came closer. That was all it took. In the weeks that followed, Tom noticed something strange. Daisy had taken up the habit of sleeping at the door, not just any door, but the closet in the back hallway where he kept Whisper's old army poncho, now folded and wrapped in plastic. One evening, he opened the door. Daisy nosed her way in, circled the box where the poncho lay, then laid down beside it. He watched. Unmoving, she rested her head on the corner of the box and closed her eyes. Tom called June. She is grieving, he said. So are you, she replied. There was a long silence. Then June added, maybe that is why she found you. Tom did not believe in fate. Not really. But he would started to believe in something like rhythm, a current that moved through the world, quiet and unseen, pulling broken pieces into place. Not to fix them, just to make them feel less alone. Whisper had found him in a crater. Shadow had waited by the mailbox. Penny had come from a brother's last act of love. And Daisy had arrived on the voice of a child who still believed dogs could carry memory. Tom took out the journal that night. Penny was asleep beneath the table. Daisy lay in the hall. Daisy dropped off. May 6th. Age. Young, but her heart is old. Notes. Doesn't he bark? Sleeps by memory. Quote, some dogs do not need new names. They just need someone to say the old ones softly. That Sunday, Tom began clearing the back acre. He had an idea, not a big one, but something that had lived in his mind for months now. He walked the space with a shovel, a ruler, and a coffee can full of stakes. He was not building another kennel. He was making something slower, something still. A garden, not with flowers, with stones. Each stone would bear a name. Whisper, Shadow, Penny when her time came, even the ones who came and went unnamed, or stayed just long enough to be remembered by paw prints. It would not be a graveyard. It would be a place to sit and remember. A place for healing, for the dogs, for the people, for himself. As he set the first stone into the earth beneath the pine tree where Whisper lay, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not a breaking, a settling. He placed his hand on the cool surface and whispered, "Still here." Part 7. The Garden of Quiet Names. The stones went in slowly, one a week. Tom did not rush it. Each one was cut by hand, sanded down with care, and lettered with a small steel punch that left tiny indents in the rock. He did not use paint. He did not need to. The sun would find the grooves and cast shadows across them at dusk. Whisper was first, then Shadow, then Duke, a one-eyed blue healer who'd only stayed a month, but had changed everything for a boy with speech problems. Then Muffin, a senior beagle with cancer who never once whimpered, only wagged. Each stone had a name, and beneath the name, just one line, never more than a few words. Tom kept a separate notebook just for those lines. Sometimes it took days to find the right one. He would walk with the dog, sit with them, listen, not for words, for feeling. June came by one day while he was setting Muffin's stone. "What do you call this place?" she asked. Tom looked around the slow rows of flat stones, the trees swaying gently above, the low wood bench he would carved from a fallen birch. He shrugged. "The garden." She smiled. "It is more than that," he said. "That is all it needs to be." That summer, people started leaving things in the garden. A woman left her father's dog tags beside Shadow's stone. A teenage girl left a bracelet made from paracord and patience near Daisy's. Someone left a single red collar with a note tucked inside. "You helped me forgive myself." Tom did not touch them. He just let the memories stay. The garden was not just for the dead. It was for the quiet things people carried, the unspoken apologies, the long-held grief, the unanswered questions they could only ask through silence. The dogs understood. They always did. In July, Penny began having trouble breathing. June diagnosed heart failure. She gave Tom medication, instructions, and a long, soft look he did not want to return. She might have a few weeks, maybe more, but when she tells you, listen. Tom nodded. He had learned that part. Dogs do not beg to stay. They just ask not to go alone. Penny passed on a warm Wednesday morning. The birds were still singing when she laid her head on Tuss's foot and exhaled one final time. He did not cry right away. Instead, he carried her gently to the pine grove where Whisper rested. He placed her in a soft patch of earth and covered her with soil, leaves, and one corner of Whisper's old poncho cut carefully, respectfully. Then he sat with her until dusk. The next morning, he carved her name into stone. Penny, the fire watcher, the soul keeper. He placed it beside Whisper's and ran his fingers over both names, like he was tracing the story of his own life. Weeks passed. New dogs came. Some stayed. Some did not, but the garden grew. By August, it had 17 stones. Tom stopped counting, not because he did not care, but because it was not about numbers. It was about echoes. He realized one morning, as he fed the dogs and stepped into the garden to water the earth, that the place was never silent. Birds, wind, breaths, footsteps, and maybe something else. Maybe memory hums. If you listen hard enough, maybe loyalty leaves a sound behind. That night, Tom wrote in the journal, not an entry, just a sentence across the bottom of the last page. They whisper still. Part 8, visitors. It began with a phone call. Tom rarely answered numbers he did not recognize, but something about the area code Illinois made him pick up. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was habit. After all, some of the dogs that needed him did not come with barking or paw prints. Sometimes they came with static and a shaky voice. Is this Whisper House? A woman, older, nervous. Yes, madam, Tom said. I do not have a dog. She began. Not anymore. But I think I need to visit. Tom paused. You are welcome to. She did not say much after that. Just gave her name Elaine Burke and a date she would be driving up. She said she did not need a room. She would sleep in her car if she had to. Tom told her she would not. Elaine arrived in the late afternoon, in a silver sedan packed to the brim with blankets, old toys, and a folded photo album strapped to the passenger seat with a seat belt. She was in her 70s. Small frame, tired eyes. Her hands shook when she stepped out of the car, but her voice did not. His name was Barkley, she said before even introducing herself. We were together 15 years. My husband passed halfway through. Barkley was with me the rest of the way. Tom nodded gently. You can tell him everything here. She did not ask what he meant. Elaine stayed 3 days. She did not speak much at first, just sat in the garden with the photo album on her lap, flipping pages slowly, whispering as if someone were listening right over her shoulder. The dogs approached her cautiously, one by one. She had a way of holding herself like someone who knew the value of silence, who'd already said all the hard things to say. Clover eventually curled against her hip. Beau put his big blocky head in her lap. Even Daisy sat beside her for nearly an hour, tail resting over Elena's boot like a shawl. Tom watched from the porch. Sometimes people needed a place to cry that was not their own living room. A place not soaked in memories that hurt. A new place to miss something in peace. Whisper House had become that place. Elaine left on the 4th morning, but before she drove off, she placed something in Tom's hand, a single photograph of Barkley, a graying spaniel in a flannel sweater. Head tilted, eyes warm. I know this sounds silly, she said, but if you ever have a dog like him, would you let me know? Tom looked at the photo. I will remember his face. You will know. I always do. That night, he added Barkley's name to the unofficial book, not under rescues, but in the back section, the one labeled Echoes. Barkley Burke belonged to Elaine, who needed him more than she will ever admit. Like warm socks, old jazz records, and sitting beside grief without blinking. Tom paused, then added, Some dogs never leave. They just wait until we can visit. And then came the others. A man who lost a canine partner in Afghanistan and never adopted again. A woman who left her dog behind during a wildfire evacuation and never forgave herself. An elderly couple who brought a tin full of ashes, wrapped in a baby blanket, asking if they could scatter them under a tree. Tom said yes to them all, not because he had the answers, but because dogs did not ask for explanations, they just showed up. So he did the same. June came by in early September. She brought dog food, vet supplies, and a warm pie in a dish she insisted Tom not return. You ever think this place is more for people than the dogs? She asked, watching Elena's ashes fall gently beneath the pine grove. Tom thought about that. Then he shook his head. I think it is for both. She smiled. You know what it is? What? A chapel. Tom chuckled, but it stuck in his throat. Later that night, after the last light had gone out and the wind had calmed, he wrote a new entry in the back of the journal. Not under dogs or echoes, but a new section entirely. He titled it Visitors, and beneath the first name, he wrote, Elaine Burke. Stayed 3 days, brought a dog-esque story, and left some of her pain. Found the place where the H finally quieted. Part 9, the return. The leaves turned like clockwork. By the second week of October, the woods around Whisper House were painted with fire reds and golds and rusted oranges that fluttered down like pieces of memory. Tom raked the yard each morning with Clover trailing behind, her one good ear flapping as she chased the wind. It had been almost 2 years since Whisper passed, and one morning, without warning, she returned, not in body, but in something else. He found her name on a letter, a thick white envelope postmarked from Nevada. The return address read, Fort Churchill Veterans Memorial Hospital. Inside was a typed note. Dear Delaney, my name is Edward Lang. I am a hospice psychologist for military veterans. One of my patients, Staff Sergeant Walter Kinley, has been requesting to speak to the man who runs Whisper House. He says a dog named Whisper saved him, and he would like to speak to her rescuer before he dies. I know this is an unusual request, but Walter is not a man who talks much, and he talks about Whisper every day. Tom read the letter twice. Then he sat back and stared at the wall, heart pounding like a hammer in his chest. Walter Kinley. The name meant nothing. And yet, Whisper had never had tags, never a chip, no collar, just a name Tom gave her. On instinct, in the middle of a crater. But she would come from somewhere, someone. Maybe this was him. The hospital was a day's drive. Tom packed lightly, left June in charge of the house, with written instructions on each dog's quirks and meal times. As he climbed into the old truck, Clover jumped up beside him. He opened the passenger door. This one is just me, girl. She whined softly, then retreated to the porch, tail low. He left Whisper's tag in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. The hospital sat on a flat rise overlooking the desert. The walls were painted pale blue. The smell of bleach and lavender hung in the halls. Nurses smiled politely, used quiet voices. Time moved slower here. Lang met him at the elevator. "Thank you for coming." He is lucid, but frail. Is he dying? Lang nodded. Soon. Maybe days. They walked in silence down a tiled hallway. Room 214. The man inside was thin, sunken, but sharp-eyed. His skin was worn like paper, his voice barely above a breath. "Whisper," he said, the moment he saw Tom. "You knew her." Tom stepped closer. "I did." Walter closed his eyes. "She was mine for 6 months. In Fallujah. She showed up after an aid. Wouldn't to leave my side." Tom felt the chill crawl up his spine. "She slept against my chest during firestorms." Walter continued, "Ate from my palm. She was the only reason I stayed alive." He turned his head, tears brimming. Then one day, she was gone. Chopper lifted off in a dust storm, and when it cleared, she was just gone. Tom nodded slowly. "She found me 2 years later, in Iraq, near Basaya." Walter let out a laugh, ragged, joyful, broken. "She survived all that time." "She did. And you named her Whisper." "I did not know what else to call her. She never barked, just stayed near." Walter's lips quivered. "She always did that." A silence passed between them, not empty, full of weight and knowing. Then Tom reached into his pocket and placed the dog tag on the nightstand. "She is buried under a pine tree by the porch." Walter stared at it like it was a medal. "She remembered," he whispered. "She carried me through one war, and you through another." Tom sat down beside the bed, voice thick. "She was more than a dog." Walter nodded slowly. "She was a promise." They spoke for an hour. Then Walter fell asleep. He never woke again. But when the nurse entered at dawn, she found the tag clasped in his hands and a faint smile on his face. Tom drove home in silence. The road hummed beneath his wheels. The desert gave way to trees, and as he pulled into the driveway of Whisper House, the dogs rushed forward. Clover, Beau, Daisy, Samily. But Tom stopped at the garden. He knelt by Whisper's stone and traced the groove of her name. Then he placed something beneath it. Not a flower, not a letter, just a small hospital-lid bracelet, worn thin. Inscribed, Kinley, Walter, 2nd Battalion. He stayed there for a long time. No tears, just breath and the whisper of wind through the trees. Part 10. Still here. The first snow came early that year. Tiny white flakes drifted like feathers through the bare branches of the pines, softening the corners of the world. The dogs lifted their noses toward the sky, blinking at the hush. Even Clover, who normally barked at everything, sat still and watched it fall. Tom stood in the doorway of the trailer, coffee in one hand, Whisper's tag in the other. He was not a young man anymore. His back ached in the mornings. His hands trembled sometimes when he opened the journal. He would outlived 3 of the dogs buried beneath the pine. And yet he had never felt more alive. Not because life had grown easier, but because it had grown truer. Every breath was earned. Every step remembered. Whisper had given him that, and he had passed it on. Whisper House now had 21 stones in the garden, each one marked with a name and a line, some funny, some tragic, some so quietly perfect they needed no explanation. Visitors came almost every week. Some brought dogs, some brought stories, a few brought silence. Tom never asked why. He just offered them tea, a place to sit, and time. Time, he had learned, was the kindest thing a person could give. One morning, a girl named Lily came with her father. She was no older than 7, with red hair in 2 braids and a band-aid across her cheek. Her father had heard about Whisper House through a veterans group and brought her hoping a dog might help with her nightmares. She wakes up crying. He whispered to Tom, clings to me like she is falling off the earth. Tom nodded. He knew that feeling. Beau big. Slobbery Beau took to her first, laid across her feet like a weighted blanket. Then Daisy, gentle and slow, curled beside her on the porch swing. Lily did not speak that day, but the next morning, when she came back, she brought biscuits and a smile. Her father cried in the truck on the way out. A week later, Lily drew a picture for Tone, crayon on folded paper, a brown dog, a white house, and the words, Whisper lives here. He pinned it above his desk. Said nothing, but for the first time in months, he let himself laugh. As winter deepened, June stopped by more often. She brought blankets, canned food, and once, a pair of new boots he pretended not to need. You ever going to write this down? She asked over dinner. Tom looked at her. What do you mean? All of it, she said, waving a spoon. Whisper, the dogs, the garden. He shook his head. I am not a writer. Maybe not, she said, but you are a witness. He looked out the window, the snow still falling, the porch empty now except for paw prints. I have written a lot of names, he said softly. That is enough. But that night, he pulled out the journal, turned to the last blank page, and began. Whispers in the sand. This is the story of how a dog found me when I was ready to disappear, and how, because of her, I have spent the rest of my life doing the opposite. I was a supply clerk in Desert Storm. No medals, no hero's tale, but Whisper did not care. She did not save me in one moment. She saved me in 1,000 small ones. And now, this house, this little wooden place in Michigan is hers. Every dog here, every soul we help, every stone we place, it is her voice. Still speaking. Still healing. Still here. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere deep in the pines, a branch creaked. Tom closed the book, placed it on the desk, and stood slowly. He walked to the porch, where the air smelled like wood smoke and memory. Clover came to his side, Daisy, and in the stillness, in the hush between breaths, Tom could almost hear her footsteps in the snow, gentle and sure, stopping just shy of his boots. He smiled. "I know," he said quietly. "You are still here." Then he turned back inside, leaving the door just a little open behind him, just in case